In our final ZBrush chapter, we will use our hand-painted displacement maps to displace stones onto our well. Then, I will show you a technique for laying snow onto our stones using an old but powerful trick that I still use in my professional CG work to this day. Alright, so now it's time for us to go ahead and displace the object that we have in ZBrush, and what we're going to do in the end is hopefully get this result where you see the stones that are popping out here, and then we're also going to end up creating these snow meshes, the plane that's below, and then the snow that's on top. So in our ZBrush file that we have, as long as we have our texture map applied, we can now add a displacement map. So here we have the texture map applied, and now we can add a displacement map. Until you have a texture map on there, you won't be able to apply a displacement map. So in here, let's click this, import, and we're going to pick that stone wall pattern displacement map that we created earlier and is also included in the Gumroad tutorial. And what we want to do is turn the intensity up to something like maybe 0.2. We don't want it up here too strong. And you'll start to kind of visually see an idea of what this looks like, but until you hit apply displacement, you don't really see it. So let's try apply displacement. And then now you can see we're actually getting displacement based off of that displacement map that we had. So let's turn off the texture map, and you can see here, yeah, stuff's actually going out. Problem is that we don't have enough tessellation in here. You can see we only have about 82,000 polygons. So let's undo that displacement, Control Z, and I'm going to turn off this texture map. I'm going to subdivide this up until about 1 million or so. Control D. Now we got about 1 million polys in here. And now let's go ahead and try this one more time. Apply displacement map, and cool. Now we start to get something working pretty well. Let's go ahead and just stay with this. I think this is going to work pretty good for our purposes. One thing I nearly forgot to mention, and that's why you see the fade between black on this, is the way that the mid value of the displacement here works. So by default this is set to 0.5. And what that means is 0.5 is the equivalent of that grayscale stuff that we were looking at earlier, the RGB color, of 128, or at least this is how I think of it as. So the 0.5 means that there's going to be no displacement, and kind of like the 128 gray value is no displacement. And then anything that's positive is going to go up, and then anything that's negative is going to go down. So based off of that displacement map that we have, if we were to go through right now, let's just test this out, and I want to show you along the side here, you're going to see stuff go out and also in. So let's apply displacement, and here you can see the stuff came out and broke the surface in the plane, and then also stuff went in. And that's because our mid value is set to gray, which allows those things to go out different directions. Now if you change this, I don't know the exact thing of what it does, but I recommend you don't. But one will either go positive fully or negative fully. So in this case, if we do this, it's all going inward, right? So it's kind of going in on itself. And then if we were to change this to 0, it's now going to go, oops, usually it's going to go the other direction. Sorry, let's change this back to 0, apply displacement. Yeah, so now you can see it going in the positive direction. So you want to keep that at 0.5 anytime you're going to use displacement based off of the RGB based displacement values. Whenever you want the white to be positive, the 128 to be neutral, which is 0.5 in ZBrush, and then the black to be negative values. So, all right, let's get back to the lesson. And one thing you'll notice is that there's obviously some kind of funky stuff happening up here. That's where we have the UV seams where they connected. And I'm not too worried about that. I'm going to smooth that out a bit. But since that's going to be covered in snow, I'm not too concerned that the shapes won't match up perfectly. And then you'll also notice here, because we had UV seams, that we have a little bit going on. But it's pretty cool. You know, we got something that's working pretty well. And if we have the texture map turned on with something like a matte cap gray, it starts to feel pretty good, you know. So that displacement map is working out pretty nicely. So I'm going to turn this off. Let's go back to this mode, and let's start going in with just our standard brush. And actually, you know what? Let's change this to a trim brush, trim dynamic. Let's click that. And by the way, for people that are wondering, when I press B, you see all these different brushes. It's because I load every single brush that's available and a bunch of custom ones into the Z Startup folder. And I recommend you guys do that because you can get to everything. So anyways, first thing I'm going to do is just go through and start smoothing out some of these sections. on these upper parts where we'd obviously have some kind of funky topology going on. And the other thing we can do too is using that trim dynamic brush that we have on, we can start kind of flattening out some of those areas if they stick out a little bit too much. And I'll probably speed up the ZBrush or Camtasia recording here and talk over this in a minute. I mean, there's not a lot to it. You just kind of keep going around and until you get most of this kind of taken care of. In a production environment, sometimes you wouldn't be able to get away with this. You'd have to have something that's much cleaner, and you'd use a 3D painting program to mask out or make, kind of like we did those tileable texture maps and the offsets. You'd probably do something like that where all the UV seams meet before you do the actual displacement. If I was displacing this just in a regular program like 3ds Max or something like that, that's what I would have done beforehand. Especially here we get some of those kind of really interesting pinching angles. Oops. Smooth that out. Just takes a little time to get through these, and you want to do your interior as well, just depending on how you want to actually view your final image or your model if you're going to use it. Me, I have an idea that I'll probably end up just viewing this from a couple custom angles. So honestly, I probably don't have to make it look pretty from every angle, but for the purposes of this tutorial, I'm going to be thorough and give everything a once over. Yeah, the trim dynamic brush is pretty nice for flattening out areas where topology gets really strange. Okay, that's pretty good. And then we can quickly fix this seam over here. However, in the key shot, once I get in here and start texturing and stuff like that, I'm probably going to avoid showing this angle. So now if we turn on our texture map, things are looking pretty good. So the next thing that we want to do is make a snow mesh for this. So I'm going to use an old school technique that we used to do in the past whenever we didn't have sculpting programs, but also we use this quite often. So basically all you got to do is make a duplicate of your well, and this bottom one, this will be our snow object, and our top one here, this will be our well object. So the snow one, what we're going to do is we're going to apply different materials to each of these. So if you come up here and you click this material channel button, this will activate the materials, and then you can flood these with different colors. So I want to give this a non-matte cap gray, so I'm going to turn this to Sketch Shaded 3, which kind of feels like snow. So I'm going to say Color, and then I'm going to Fill Object. Then I'm going to go back up here to my original object, and I'm going to make that map cap gray, and I'm going to say Color and Fill Object, and hopefully this worked properly. Yeah, I think so. So now we have the snow underneath and then this one on top. And just to have it in here, I'm going to keep this texture map on for this one. And in the subtool down here, yeah, that's cool. So now we have the two different materials on these. And just remember, in order to put those different materials on, you have to turn this on first, the material channel. But I'm going to click this off now because I don't need it on anymore. So the next thing we can do is we need to offset the snow. So let's go to our transform mode by pressing W. So we've got the transform tool. We're going to drag that out. And then here in the middle, we're just going to click that and move it up. And again, we're holding down the shift key in order to lock the axis constraint. So we're just moving this up, and already you can see that, hey, we got snow sitting on top of stone. And you know, it's not perfect, but you get the idea of how this can quickly start to become something if you start to sculpt in here and play around with it a bit. And yeah, we use this all the time in production, especially for background objects. Imagine you see something like that, you're already done. But we're going to be seeing this up close, we're going to give it a little more love. So I'm going to go back to our stone base that we had here. And yeah, you know what? Let's turn off the material underneath, or sorry, the texture map, because I just want to see the solid color. I think this will help me with visualization purposes. And then here we have our snow on top. So before I go through and start kind of erasing different parts of the snow to make it feel a little less CG, what I want to do first is I'm going to, and you know what, I think we should probably pull that down just a bit more. So it feels like it's sitting more right on top. I think that's a little better. I think we got a little too high there. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to create a plane. And you remember from the images that we had a minute ago in Photoshop, this is the plane that's going to become our snow plane. And we're going to want it to feel like a snowdrift on one side and a little bit lower on the other. So what we need to do is go to another subtool over here. Just click on something like Cylinder 3D1. Click that again and come down here and just click on Plane 3D. So we got that, and now we have a plane object. So now we want to go back to our well, and we want to append that because we want to add it to here. So underneath subtool, if you click on this, append, click that, and now you can go through here and choose any subtool to add to this. And we want the plane 3D, click that. Now you can see that it's actually in here. I'm going to press Alt and click that so it's activated. And then you can also see that it's in our piece here. The problem is it's not rotated properly. So we're going to take that and rotate it right now. I'm going to press W. I'm going to click on this because I know that's going to draw an angle out here. And then I'm going to rotate this 90 degrees. Now I know you can't see it, but I know that this will rotate properly by holding down the Shift key. So I'm going to go to rotate mode by pressing R. And then I'm going to start dragging this up, but I'm going to hold Shift and go about here, which should make it about 90 degrees. Voila, it worked. Now I'm just going to drag this out and kind of move this, and we want to make this bigger, obviously. And I know it's not perfect center, but that's fine. So let's scale this up. Press Shift F, we got clean topology on here, so that's nice. And let's keep going a little bit bigger. Because once we get into key shot, we want the edges of our snow plane to go out pretty far, so we have a way that we can kind of hide that there's a plane edge on it. And maybe we can kind of non-uniform scale this a bit by going to the move mode and then clicking this and dragging it down a bit. Alright, cool. And maybe we want to pull that down just a bit. Alright, now we're in business. So next thing I'm going to do here is let's show everything. So we see our snow on top, and then we have our plane object on the bottom. Next we want to start pushing and pulling the snow plane around a little bit. And I'm just going to non-uniform scale this just a bit more. And now we're going to start building that snowdrift. But in order to do that, we need to give it a bit more topology. So I'm going to subdivide once, and then I'm going to play around with this bit. So let's go to the brush mode. And I think I'll just go to the standard mode and start painting. Let's see what happens. Okay, you can see this starts to build up a little bit, but we need to have way more strength. So what we're going to do, I'm going to undo that. Let's increase our brush size, pressing S, and going like this. And also too, I want this to be a bit more generic, like I don't want it to flow just perfectly. So I'm going to undo that, and then we can change this to spray mode. So now when we go like this, it feels a little bit more organic and lumpy. So doing that, I'm going to go ahead and give this a little bit of surface, and it's going to be higher around where the well is, and then I'm going to press Alt to invert that for the edges so it goes down. Let's take a look at this in 3D. Okay, cool. So it's starting to come up towards the top here and starting to go down towards the edges, but we need to go even further down towards the edges. And sometimes it's hard to get those really to go super far down without using the move tool. And this time what I mean by the move tool is we're going to use a move brush. So let's press B, press M, And here, this is standard with ZBrush, the move tool. Let's grab that. And some of these corners we're just going to pull down a bit, all around the edges. I'm going to increase my brush size. And you'll see this will kind of play nicely with our key shot camera a little bit later, because we're going to have kind of the idea that maybe this well is sitting on like a little hilltop or something like that. Alright, cool. We have some stuff kicking up here just a little bit, so you know, if I really wanted to go in here, I bet I could even use our trim dynamic brush and just bring that down a bit. Maybe not. You know what I can do? Is I'm going to mask, select all of this, and then Control Alt to deselect a portion of it. Deselect a portion, deselect a portion, deselect a portion. And then I'm going to press Control W and polygroup that, and then Control Shift click this middle one, and then let's delete that hidden topology. Before we do that, we need to delete lower and then say delete hidden. Okay, so that's pretty tricky. So now we don't have to worry about that anymore. And let's figure out which side do we want to have our snowdrift on. And I think we should be careful to make sure that we don't do it on the edge of the well where we had the UVW seam. So let's click on the well again. And okay, here's the seam that we had right here. So I'm going to alt click our snow plane again. And when we get to key shot, we'll probably have this facing in the back. So let's do something like this. So we'll have our snowdrift building on this side, and it'll be lower on this side. So I'm going to go back to our standard brush, and I'm going to turn off this lazy mouse. It's on by default, but I think I need to turn the Z intensity down a bit. Okay, so now we're going to play around with this. And one thing you'll notice, sometimes if you're trying to work this, you'll see that the sides are still moving and not building up right around here. That's because when these subtools are active and not in transparency mode, it acts kind of like a blocker, which is actually quite useful. But if you come down here and you click this, transparency mode, now we can sculpt under here as if that well doesn't exist. And that's going to be advantageous for us for this part where we're building up our snowdrift along the side of the well. And this side over here, we'll have that going down a bit. But anywhere it meets around the well base, you do want to have just a little bit of buildup, because it probably wouldn't have like a negative space in between that. Even in the back, we're not going to see it, but I'm just going to build it up just a bit more. And you'll notice that I'm using a very low subdivision level for this. This allows me to do some large topology changes really quickly before I start to get into the finer parts of the subdivisions. Alright, let's turn off transparency mode. Okay, this foreground piece we need to pull down just a bit. And already we're starting to get in pretty good shape. So let's subdivide this a couple more times. Control D, 43,000. And now we can have our well showing a little bit, but you can see still how it kind of respected that, right? So let's undo those. And let's turn transparency on again. Now we can even get more accurate, bringing this up closer here. Just building up a little bit higher. Imagine that the wind is blowing from the left and it's just been stacking snow up on top of this. And over here on this side, maybe it's not quite so stacked. I think that's feeling about right. Okay. Yeah. Let's go in here just a bit more. And let's turn off transparency mode. And now we have kind of a nice snowdrift building up against this. I think it'd be nice to have it kind of almost curving up a bit. But for the purposes of this demo, I'm not going to go super crazy on this because I don't want to bore you guys, but you get the idea. You can go pretty far with this. So I'm going to go ahead and give this one, I'm going to go here and press the material mode again, the material channel. I'm going to give this a snow as well. So that's applied. Let's go to color, fill object. And then now you're starting to get the idea that, yeah, this is a snow covered well. It needs another subdivision, so let's give it a bit more topology so we can smooth that out. We're almost at 1 million. And let's give our snow on our rock here a little bit of love. And what I mean by giving this a little love is we want to be able to blend in even a little bit nicer between here, and also we don't want such a uniform distribution of snow along all the rocks. So for example, here's a reference image of actual snow on top of rock. You can see here there's like quite a bit of little breakup, so maybe we can get some of that breakup into our snow. And you can see where here maybe it's thicker, and then some areas maybe have almost no snow at all. So we're going to click our other snow subtool in here. And we're going to come through here and let's start pulling out some of these sections so we can get that to meet up nicely. And I think what we should do here where the snow is actually meeting at the bottom is make sure that there's no empty rock space. Like I want it to be a solid snow line. I'm going to go to transparency mode here just so we can make sure this builds out properly. And also too, I think the side here where the wind is going to be blowing heavier, we're going to have thicker amount of snow, and over here we'll delete a little bit of it since the wind maybe would have blown the snow off there, or maybe the snow got melted on that side because the sun was shining from that side. Who knows? But first off, let's just make sure that we have snow covering all the base connection points. And then we should actually have a little bit more building out from here. So it feels like it's mounding up. I'm going to hold down the shift key to smooth that out in a few places. Probably be a little tricky to get these to blend nicely, but I think this will work pretty well in the end. Alright, so what we don't want to have is this kind of thing where it feels like it's not a good blend. So let's go in here and kind of push that back just a bit. Now it's starting to blend fairly nicely in here. It's not a perfect ramp, but we could make it perfect if we just spend the time to do it. It's up to you guys. If you want to make a nice personal piece that has that, feel free to spend the extra time to do it. I'm going to turn this off again one more time just to make sure that this builds out nicely. Fill in some of these spots a little bit more. Okay, let's not overkill it. Next thing, let's delete out some of the snow that's on this side. So we're just going to press the Alt key and start clicking on this. But again, looking at that reference image, maybe we want to have a little bit more breakup within here. So let's click and make an alpha choice here. We'll give something that has a little bit of breakup, maybe something like this. So now you'll see as we start to break in here, it actually starts to chew away a little bit more. And that can kind of give us a little bit more of that organic snow breakup. Play around with a couple different masks. You might find one that works better than another. This one's pretty cool. So let's say this side, we're probably going to look at the camera something like this. So over here, let's kind of through here, let's delete out some of this snow. Make it a little bit more barren. Especially right here on this side. I'm thinking maybe the sunlight is hitting this side of it where it's melting the snow a bit more. Interesting. Let's turn off this material. Oops, I accidentally clicked my other subtool. That's what's happening. So let's go back to our snow. It's because I'm holding down the Alt key to reverse this from Z-add to Z-sub. So as you guys know, Alt will also allow you to click other subtools. So I just got a little confused, I'm thinking. But this is nice. We're starting to get a little bit more of that organic breakup on the edges, which is really what we want to sell this a bit better. And here we're starting to smooth this out a bit, so let's actually go in a positive direction. We'll bring more snow, especially as we get to the tops here, and this will help us in a number of ways. It's going to help hide this frickin' UV seam that we had earlier. Let's go back to transparency mode on this one, fill that out a lot quicker. You can hold down shift. And the thing that's cool about this subtool as well, or not subtool, but using the alpha, is you get that nice kind of crunchy feel, but they can go through and smooth things out. And this kind of thing right here, you almost want to have a clay buildup. So let's do that just to fill in some of these spots so it feels like we have kind of like a uniform snow buildup. I think that's going to be a good idea. Let's do that to all these snow sections just to fill this out a bit. We can smooth that out after if we want to. I know this chapter is a little longer than the others, but this is where all the fun stuff is. Yeah, I mean, this is a technique, well, I mean, the idea of taking the mesh and then duplicating it up for snow, this is something we did on, I mean, we still do it. Back on Warcraft 3, The Reign of Chaos, for anyone that saw the cinematics for that. That was like 12, 13 years ago. We did that on a lot of stuff. Snow-covered mountains, dirt-covered rocks, you name it. Super useful. Well, not the clay buildup part, but the copying of the snow mesh on top of another. So I highly recommend you guys using that and trying it out for all you environment artists out there. The clay buildup is actually kind of giving it a nice texture as well. But we will go through there and smooth that out a bit more. And then here, right, we want to cover that stuff up. Don't want to show those edges, those bad edges. Hide our mistakes. That's what CG's for, shortcuts, whatever you can do. Some of the topology is getting a little strange right there. That's okay. Some more mistakes to hide. So the interesting thing about this tutorial that I put together is a lot of you that are watching this, you probably know that this was actually part of a live demo I did for ZBrush at the ZBrush Art Summit. And it's really challenging, you know, trying to do something there where you have to fit everything into 40 minutes. So the one that I do for ZBrush is obviously, it's got to be really quick and it's under pressure, and you just hope that things don't crash as you're doing it. But here we can spend a little bit more time to polish areas and give it a little bit more love. So now it's starting to feel pretty nice. We got that nice snow covered top. Let's go back to our standard brush. Let's smooth out some of these areas. It's starting to get just a little bit too crazy in here. I'm just going to kind of sporadically smooth this out in some places. Cool. I've done a lot of these so far, like as I've been practicing for ZBrush Central. I think I've made this thing like 10 different times just to practice it and get it going more and more, and this is one of the nicer ones I've made since I've had a little extra time to build this up. So thanks for your patience while I'm doing this. And of course you got the power to fast forward through these things if you want to, if you don't like listening to me talk. Alright, so again, let's get back to reality. Let's make sure we're focusing on the areas that I think we're going to see in camera. We got snow built up on this side, less on this side. Let's do a little bit more breakup. I'm going to hold the Alt key so I can subtract from here a bit. Cut away a little bit from these areas where it meets the top, or anywhere that feels like a little bit too sharp of a transition line between the snow and the rock. You know, it's okay to have a couple spots where there's almost no snow. Alright, I think we're in pretty good shape. Let's add a little bit of this kind of texture to the plane. And we can do the same thing with that brush that we had, but we probably shouldn't make it too big because we want to keep the same frequency. You know, something like this can take a little bit too long. So another thing we can do too is, since this technically has UV maps on it, we can make an alpha map to do something really quickly. So let's drag this over. Let's pull in an alpha map. I have a couple, if you have the Gumroad tutorial, Moss A Tileable and Moss A Tileable Diffuse Snow. Let's click on this one, the Moss A Tileable Bump. Even though this is a moss, I think it'll make an interesting mask for this. So now we have this mask active. Let's go down here to masking, mask by alpha, click that. Now you can see that you have the mask in here. However, I want to get some really high frequency, so we're going to do some tiling on this. So let's go to modify. And on these H tiles and V tiles, let's increase this by about 3 and 3. And let's mask by alpha again. Now you can see we have a little bit more frequency. I think we can go even higher. So let's say 5 and 5. And mask by alpha one more time. Alright. So the thing that could be interesting about this is, now if we sculpt on here, and I'm going to turn off this alpha on this, I'm going to turn this back to what our default brush was. You can see here, you know, we're just painting on it and it's getting the shape. And if you press Ctrl H, you can hide the mask and it's still technically active. And the other thing we can do too is, if we want to quickly get some deformation or interesting stuff in here, I'm going to press Ctrl H again to show the mask. We can come down here to deformation, and we can play around with something like the inflate. Let's press like 10, and then overall it's giving this an interesting noise. I'm going to press Ctrl H again to hide the mask, and here we have just a ton of noise information. And I can go through and smooth things after, but obviously that saves me a ton of time than if I would have gone through with the brushes over and over and doing that. So let's use that. I'm going to turn these tiles back down, because if I use an alpha again later, that'll activate here too, even if I'm on a brush. And then let's just smooth some of these areas out on our snow plane. We just don't want this to feel too uniform and CG. Once we have textures on this, it's definitely going to help out, but got to be careful. And even on top of that, I think we can do a little bit of interesting sculpting to cut out some almost hole type shapes, as if, you know, the ground is not perfect. Maybe there was a bunch of little rocks or things underneath. I think that could be interesting as well. And over here, the snow is a little bit funky, so I think we just need to build that up just a bit more. This is the perfectionist side of me again. Let's go back to the transparency mode, build that up a bit. Oh, and let's press Control H again and let's clear that mask. And off transparency mode. Okay. So it's really just a combination of these different brushes that can really help kind of bring all this stuff together, tie everything in really nicely. Once we get some nice lighting on here, you're probably not going to see a lot of these little places where it doesn't feel like it blends in nicely. Okay, I think we're in pretty good shape. You know, we could take this into Keyshot right now and start getting some good results. So let's do one more thing. Go to our standard brush. Just going to give a little bit more textural information into some of these parts. I'm also going to kind of cut in some spaces on a few of these, so we have a couple deeper holes. Let's turn this alpha off. Maybe we have some bigger clumps, just to have some imperfections, you know? Like, it's always good to throw a couple interesting things in there, just to play with light and do different stuff. I mean, I guess if it was like a super fresh snow, it would probably be extra nice. You wouldn't have to worry about all that. But anyways, I think we're in really good shape right now. So we're going to save this off, and the next thing we're going to do is we're going to take this into Keyshot, and we're going to apply some shaders to this, and we're going to render it. So yeah, we're done with this part, and let's save this off if you're working from home, and we'll move on to the final chapter. If you like this video, the entire tutorial is available for free on Gumroad. Click the yellow Gumroad pop-up box below, and you can download all 5 HD videos for this tutorial series. Additionally, I've included everything that I demonstrate in the project, such as the maps that you see here, like this diffuse, displacement, spec map, and even my bump map. And then in addition to that, I've also put my ZBrush file in here that you guys can open up and use. And finally, I've included the Keyshot file. So whether you want to create everything yourself or use my maps and files to follow along, everything's absolutely free. And as usual, thank you guys so much for watching these tutorials, and I hope you learned a few valuable tricks. Until next time.